want to hand it over to Raj. Thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Bria, for inviting me. Thank you, SDE, for inviting me. And yeah, I think chat-wise, I'm not always the best at checking the chats while I'm presenting or talking. So totally down if people are putting stuff in the chat, but maybe Bria or someone else can just be like, oh, there's a question in the chat. Oh, here it is. And then that's all good too.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, and right now on the screen it says, go ahead and this is the invitation to share in the chat for now. Let's see how many people. Yeah, we have 15 people. I feel like if we go around and each share, that will take a large chunk of time. So let's put in the chat, but just what brings you to this specific session today? What do you hope to gain out of this session? So the invitation is to just go ahead and put that into the chat. And we could just read each other's responses. I'll read responses out loud. Yes, May. Let me see if I can change access to the anyone with the link. Yep. Okay. That should work now. Cool. So Bria says, hey, she's really excited just to learn about our center and how we have focused on decolonization. See that Amy says that they're interested in starting an SDE center. They unschool their parents. May is newish to the process, but part of a co-op in Southern California. Catherine's talking about, yep, long has wanted to start something, or at least partner with people that want to start something and invites diversity of all forms. Otter's a teacher at a forest school that's wanting to move towards self-directed learning. And then Olina is in San Diego and also kind of looking for SDE spaces, either find one or create one. That Tanya is excited about learning about our journey and how we have liberation and justice at the core. And they are in New Jersey. Heidi's also forest school. Awesome. And yep, in that process as well. Yeah. Cool. Cool. If you have not written, you can continue to write. If you, Tanya, also, yep, wanting to open a center 1 day a week potentially. Does not want to reproduce the practices and culture of whiteness. Kate was at the My Reflection Matters session. Awesome. What's up, Kate? Good to see you again. Sweet. We have an awesome group up in here. If you haven't written yet, go for it. And I'll get started right now. We'll have more chances to share, trying to make this interactive, but also be able to share our journey at the same time. Any accessibility needs that are not like currently provided that folks want to share? Any accommodations needed? I know it's hard, we're on Zoom, so not tons of stuff we can do. But anything anyone wants to share right now? Okay. Okay, cool. I like to have visuals and write things down too. I know some people are more visual learners and like things in writing, while some people are more auditory. Also, so many other styles of learning that Zoom conferences aren't always the most conducive to, but we'll do what we can. So I want to start with my journey, just who I am. Give you guys a little background, and then hear from all of you as well, and then go into Liberated Kids journey. So I am of South Asian descent. I was born here in what is now the United States, what is now called the United States of America, in California. But both my parents immigrated from India. And so I grew up in a pretty diverse community, went to school, quote unquote, I was good at the game of school, did well. But even while I was in school, I remember as a kid, like what I valued the most was the learning I did outside of school. Right. And like my intentions, my goals, and like who I wanted to be was set in stuff that happened outside of school and was not part of my school process. I did get a bachelor's degree, went to college, and a couple of years after that, I decided to like just get deeper into my roots, get deeper into like what is like my purpose, like just all of these things. And so I took like a one-way ticket to India, like when I was like 24, 25, 20, yeah, no, younger, 23, to really just do a deep journey. I had some connections out there. And so a couple of experiences or kind of, yeah, a couple of experiences I want to highlight. And one with this organization called SDE. They are in the lower Himalayas in India. And we had learned about them through some contacts, and we were visiting this organization. I was learning about their sport. And they were started by this couple. And so they were telling me their story, and basically they were from the city, they were from Delhi, but were also kind of disillusioned with the rat race of life, with capitalism, trying to figure out their purpose when they were younger. And so they were wandering in the mountains. And some people in these small villages in the mountains out there, like these villages, population of like 100 people, 200 people, saw these people wandering, saw this couple wandering, and knew they looked, like they were from the city and quote unquote educated, schooled. And so they asked them, like, why don't you just do something? Like you look like you're doing nothing. Why don't you like teach our kids how to read or do something? And so they started doing that. They started teaching kids in the village how to read. Someone else came by and was like, why don't you actually just start a school? Like you're just doing this. Why don't you start a school? There's no schools out here. Why do you start a school? So they opened schools in these villages, started with 1, 2, opened some more. Someone else came, big nonprofit, people like, you're doing this without funding? Like, why don't you become a nonprofit, an NGO, and like apply for funding? So they did that. They got funding. They started getting funding from like Oxford. And so at that point, they're like, they had to go back and like show accountability, right? So now you're getting funding, getting grants. You have to show that you're like meeting certain measures. And so they were then out in the community, kind of doing research, right? Talking to people in the community on the impacts of the schools. And this was maybe 6, 7, 8 years after they started. And what they heard shocked them, especially from the elders in the community, especially the elder women in the community. What they heard was like, you're ruining our children. And like, what? Like, we're starting schools. We're like teaching them how to read. Like, and the women are like, you're ruining our children. They no longer want to like help on the farm. They no longer want to do like anything in our community. They think that we are backwards, and they don't even want to speak our local languages because their local language was not Hindi, which was what being taught in these schools. And so they don't even want to speak our language. And not only that, like they've opened up to the market. Like when they're going to school and coming back, they want to buy things. They're spending more money. So not only are they not helping us work, they're actually spending more of our money. And then the conversation continued to like, even those that like are achieving this quote unquote promise of getting a better education and leaving the village and getting a job and making money, they're like, even those that are leaving are not getting and taking jobs. And when we find out, like they're drunk in the city and they're not sending us back money, like this isn't working. And so I was like a 23, 24-year-old listening to this story, and like so many things clicked for me, and just like what bothered me in my life too, and just like going through this rat race. And it led that organization into the journey of like, what does relevant and real education actually mean? They realized like in the end, like India and many of these places around the world are just replicating the colonized models of schooling that was left. In India being the British model of schooling. And they started doing a deep dive on what does relevant education actually look like for this community? where we are. And so that was their deep journey. And that was my deep journey, kind of being there. I was there for a good 4 or 5 months, learning and also volunteering, just being there. Also on this journey in India, I came across this organization, Shikshantar. Some of you may have heard of Manish Jain, who so in some of more of the international kind of unschooling, self-directed conferences, sometimes speaks and of things of that sort. They were based in this place called Udaipur in India, and they had what they called a learning society, was kind of what they organized there, which was a self-directed learning society of kids who either left the school system or dropped out of the school system, multi-ages. They had a center. And at that point in my life, that seemed like totally radical. Like, what do you mean? Like no school at all? Like I get like creating schools that has like relevant education, but like this is like no school at all. And it was based, their thinking was also based on this really decolonized method of thinking. Of like, this is how humans have learned for thousands of years. And we are reclaiming that. This isn't something new. We're reclaiming that. And we're connecting. And so there was just like, oh, you want to learn this? Like, these are the people in our network. Go, like, let's do it. And we're just connecting people in the community to learn from each other, and also had a space, like a center as well. So at that point in my life, I was like, okay, I know I want to get into education back when I get into the States. So, and at that point in my life, I was thinking like, I want to be in the system for a while to be able to speak to like what the system is, right? Like to be able to just see what it's like to be in the system. And so I applied to a teaching program, and I started teaching in a classroom out here in Oakland, California. And going in, I was thinking like, okay, I'll be in this for like 2, 3, 4 years. And then I want to step out and like create something, initiate something. But that took 11 or 12 years before I stepped out. I was in the system for a long time. And I'll say a lot of things did keep me in. And the number one thing is like the power of community. Like there are not many spaces, especially in the United States, where community naturally gathers, right? In a lot of other countries, you have like central plazas, you have spaces where people just are and meet. And in smaller communities, right, you have like village councils, or in India they call panchayat. And so you have these spaces, but I felt like the school is actually still one of these spaces where families that are local, that are neighboring, still come, and they're still there. And I think different schools do it to varying degrees, right? But the school I was at was really the center of community. And so that power of community kept me in it for a long time, just being connected to families and kids. I also had a lot of freedom in the school I was at and in the classroom I was at. So we did just a lot of kind of social justice work and expeditionary work there as well. But at the same time, like I also realized that I was constantly coercing kids all day, every day, right? In the name of classroom management, right? Don't call them rewards and punishments, whatever it is, but it's not like constantly coercing kids to be seated, be listening, do things they don't want to do at that moment, all day. And then also just getting really irked by the standardization of it, right? The same curriculum, same standards year after year. And seeing that there are, and this is again, I guess what like seeing so many kids that were like talented and brilliant, but just not good at the game of school, or didn't care to be good at the game of school. And then if they were Black or Indigenous or a person of color, if they were poor, like what are their other options in life then? If you're not good at the game of school, and school's your only option, like that's where this whole right school to prison pipeline and all this stuff that exists, right? Like so that just kept irking me too. Like I know you're brilliant, I know you're talented, and like this one way of like measuring you isn't working. And what are your other options? And then another thing that I saw, I worked in primarily a Latinx community at the school I was at, was that we had like 4th and 5th graders, that's the grades I taught usually, that couldn't talk to their parents because their parents were Spanish only, and these kids had went through like schooling in English, where English, not only were they speaking English, but like there was this distinct, like English is valued, right? While your home language, home culture is not as valued. Well, it wasn't an explicit like lesson, there's this implicit lesson, right? That happens. And so to see like fourth and fifth graders come into like conferences, not being able to explain things to their parents. And to me, it's like, how is this much different than what folks in this country did to indigenous kids when they took them from their own communities and had them lose their cultures and force their culture out of them. How is this different from in California, the mission system, where indigenous people were taken, like taught Spanish, they had to learn Spanish and forget their ways of being. And so that had me think, how is this different than that? So I put colonization 2.0 on there. So all those things, eventually drew me into looking for like what else exists out here in the United States. I hadn't done a deep dive yet into like what does unschooling or self-directed education look like. And so luckily the first thing I found was a Kayla Richards podcast, and like devoured that, went through like episode 1 till whatever, and went through that, read Peter Gray's Free to Learn, did some pilots. So I ran a little summer program to like pilot, what would this look like? What would an SDE space look like? I was still teaching at this time. So wherever I had spaces, did little like self-directed pilots within my school, connected locally with organizations that were, self-directed or at least close to self-directed. And also about 8 years ago, became a parent myself. And so that also like brought, in some cases, urgency to like, I want to make sure there's something there that feels liberatory for my child as well. So yeah, that just kind of learning. There was that was my like learning phase. And before going any further, I want to just make sure, I think, we are at the conference, so I'm assuming everyone has some sort of working definition of self-directed education, but I just want to read the definition that they have on their website. Self-directed education is education that derives from the self-chosen activities and life experiences of the person being educated, whether or not those activities were chosen deliberately for the purpose of education. So that's kind of the definition I'm using as well. So just want to put that up there. Yeah. So yeah, that was my journey to SDE. It was interesting because in my 12 years of teaching, like in the back of my mind were those experiences that I had in South Asia and India. And then finally, I would say like 4 to 5 years ago, it was like, okay, I need to like do my deep dive here. But yeah, that was my journey to SDE. I feel like now's a good time to just take a quick break, like not a break, but like let's take a quick breakout rooms for you all to share your journey to SDE as well. For time's sake, I'm doing breakout rooms instead of like all sharing here. So I think I'll set up 4 breakout rooms, which will just be like randomly placed in them. And you'll have like 8 minutes total in your room. So approximately 2 minutes per person in the breakout room to just share your own journey. Like what has brought you to self-directed education? So that'll be there. I also want to just invite folks or propose a few agreements, especially as we share with each other. Do folks want, that's fine, I'll read that. The first proposed agreement is number 1 is share your truth. Number 2 is equitable distribution of voice. And by equitable does not always mean equal. I think it takes into account which number 3 is, which that our values, intersectional identities, intersectional meaning like racial identity, gender identity, sexual identity, neurodiverse identity, all of those things, right? So our values, our intersectional identities, and past experiences matter. Number 4, assume positive intent and own your impact. So if even without intent that there was a negative impact caused, someone can call that in and claim the ouch, like, ouch, this hurt because this. And let's also, then the person can take responsibility. Oops, my bad, that's not what I intended. And just realizing, number 5, this is an ongoing learning process. And number 6, listen from a place of trying to understand. Is there anyone that wants to just question any of these agreements? Or is there anyone that feels like we need to add any more agreements in when we're sharing collectively during this time? Anything? Yeah. Okay, sweet. So I'm going to open up 4 breakout rooms, and folks will be randomly placed into them, and just kind of sharing your own journey to SDE. You'll have about 8 minutes as a group to share, so about 2 minutes per person. Cool. Go ahead and join your room.
Raj, did you want me to join a room or stay here?
Up to you. Up to you.
Okay.
I'm going to join one as well.
Cool.
I'll go. I'm the executive director of a forest school, preschool through 5th grade. And this is our 2nd year as a full-on school. I just had a forest school preschool for the last 7 years. And I've always wanted to go in this directed of self-directed learning, but I never really had the capacity. And now I have all these paying families who are kind of willing to go down this path with me. And a lot of teachers who have a lot of questions. So my staff is here today also, and we're just trying to wrap our head around what it looks like to emphasize self-directed learning in an outdoor atmosphere. Because I think, like, when you think about like a Sudbury model, you've got like a lot of kids like bouncing off of each other and ideas and things like that. But in an atmosphere where it's all outside, there's not as much access to resources all of the time. Kids are outside, so they're in their classes and they're so anyway, I'm just interested in how to like, we have a mobile school bus classroom, but they're only in there by grade. So anyway, I'm just looking for ideas and figuring out how we can capture this model with a little more structure. I guess that sounds counterintuitive, but that's what we're looking for.
Heidi, that's so cool. I wish I lived near you.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
That sounds amazing. And I live in Colorado, so you'd think there would be lots of that here, but that's one of the reasons I wanted to join this particular session. I live outside of Boulder, and the Facebook groups for homeschooling and unschooling, there's definitely some good conversations on there, but we actually have a Sudbury school in Boulder, and I've heard different things around it. I haven't really explored. I think it's not like super close to where I live, and I'm not sure if I'm willing to do like a lot of driving at this point. So I'm just it feels like there's a gap where I live, and that something like this could be really quite incredible to offer, but I don't know what that would look like, and I feel a bit intimidated around taking that on. And I have a couple of parent friends that I think maybe would be interested in possibly collaborating, but I thought I would kind of take the lead on kind of learning more about what it could look like. So it just feels like the school that my daughter's at, that she's aging out of, is like this incredible model. I wish we could just continue we could have as a place for her to go after, because she wants to go there every day and doesn't like to leave. Like, she just loves it. And I just, to have a place like that that would evolve and be something available for kids who are older than she is at 6. So very excited to learn more about what it looks like to start something. And yeah.
Cool.
Can I jump in real quick, Melissa?
Oh,
Just
sure.
a few quick things I want to say is like, so one thing, potential thing is I know that there's a bunch of forest schools in Colorado. And what happens is once the kids leave the preschool program, a lot of parents want to continue some sort of like insular thing for kindergarten or first grade before they introduce to a more, typical elementary school. So collaborating with a potential forest school in your area could be an avenue. Other thing I was going to mention is I hear this a lot where people say, I'm afraid to like take this. This is a, like, oh my gosh, how I always say it's like camping. You just jump in with some people and you just try some shit, like literally dirty. You know what I mean? Boots on the ground. We're fucking winging it. And then you start going, okay, yeah, no way. Or, oh my God, this doors are opening. But it's like to start it is just like, oh, I don't know. But it's like, it doesn't have to be like you have a center and you have a logo and you have all these things. It's just kind of like this guerrilla learning kind of style that I feel like that's the only way to go. I hear this a lot, like, I just don't know about starting something on my own. It's like, you just got to jump in. It's like camping. You won't have everything you need and you'll make it work.
I love that, Heidi. Thank you for sharing that, because one of the things I have to push against for decades now is my perfectionism and wanting things to have a plan and kind of knowing how it's going to turn out, which there's absolutely no way. I mean, having a child is like that. So thank you.
And here we are talking we're talking about failure and how that's how you learn, right? And it's like, you may just like fall on your face and this may be a total, but at least you tried, right?
Yes. That's kind of the point
so
I got
important.
to as she's gotten to the age where like we do have to figure out what happens next in some sort of decisive way. It feels like I'm being like closer and closer to being like, yep, it's on me. Like I gotta take that step. So thank you, and thank you for mentioning the forest schools, because you're right, there are some in our area, but they definitely stop at a very young age. So that's a great idea.
So, I want to make sure that we have time for our last participant. I can't see their name.
I'm Kate.
Oh, Kate. Sorry, Kate. I just want to make sure we had time for you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, hi. This is my third SDE weekend, and it's just really funny to think about like where I was 3 years ago and where I feel like I am now, because I've shifted and changed and deepened my understanding of what unschooling is and SDE. I am a former classroom teacher. I was a classroom teacher for 15 years in New York City. And then I had my first child. And I was a problem teacher. I was always like the one who was trying to pushing for social emotional education and spending a lot of time on that. And I realized like, I really want my children to be in something else, but it's like not just for my children. I want everyone's children to feel that way. And I have especially learned on my journey from Black and Brown women, especially, and Black and Brown men in this movement. And I feel like this can be a movement where whiteness is centered. And it's very important to me to decenter whiteness in a lot of this work. So a lot of my mentors, guides in this work have just had me questioning a lot of systems of oppression and how they're all intersected. And how I'm really now, my children are now 7 and 5. And we lost her.
I think she accidentally clicked that button. That happens all the time.
So frustrating.
I know. I've done it a million times. Are we the only? Oh, I don't know how to. I'm just not really well versed in this Zoom thing.
It's a learning curve, but we're gonna get kicked out in probably 30 seconds anyway. So
okay, I'll see you on the other side.
think everyone made it back. Did someone still have to share? Did anyone not get a chance? I want to share out right now or in the chat? Cool. Yeah, cool. Maybe if anyone didn't get a share in their group, they could share it in the chat, so their group can see that too. But yes, we all have our own journeys to SDE. I feel there's a lot of overlap as well. I know I heard in the groups that I was in. I'm going to continue on my journey in that one of my big questions was like, yes, for my own child, but also just like, who are the people who suffer the most at the hands of the mandatory school system, especially in the country, in the United States? And when I answered that, right, it was indigenous people who often got forced from their cultures and from their families. It was Black people who initially were not allowed to be in schools, then had segregated schools, and now still live in a system of whiteness in schools and suffer in many ways. Other people of color, neurodiverse families, neurodiverse kiddos, and then queer LGBTQ plus kiddos, just kiddos basically who don't fit the norm, right? Don't fit the quote unquote norm. And just children in general, right? Children are suffering in general in schools. Like, yes, some are suffering more and have suffered more historically, but children are suffering in general in school. And so now I'm going to get into like how Liberated Kids started. And I know that every kind of SDE community and center has its own journey. And I'm not going to focus on like the legal business aspects of it right now. It's more like just like the theoretical and process. Oh, can you guys not hear me? I see someone said they can't hear me. Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, Marion or Marion, yeah, maybe, not sure if you can log in and log back out. Or yeah, maybe I can help you. Okay. So I'm just going to share our process as Liberated Kids and also acknowledging that this is like my perspective. We've had a community, we've had a collective that has visioned and started this from the start. But I'm going to speak from my experiences, and I've had these experiences because of our community and in community. So kind of acknowledging both those things. I'm not speaking for everyone in Liberated Kids, but I've had these experiences because of our community. I also created this little planning template. If it helps you, I'm going to put it in the chat. You don't have to use it, but of course not. But just an invitation if it helps. You will probably have to make a copy of it so you could edit it and put stuff into it. Yeah, we'll kind of be touching. I'll refer to that as like. And so I'll say step 0, and I talked about this before, was like just learning, right? Deschooling myself, process 1, doing ton of reading, free to learn, Peter Gray, listen to Keela Richards' podcast, learn from the SDE websites, read articles. I think visiting places was also really key for me. I visited a Sudbury school in Chicago, a Sudbury school out here, visited an ALC that's about 3 hours away from here. And just like also then connected with Alder Commons in Portland via Zoom and talked to them. And so step 0 is really just like learning, right? Like learning what's out there, how did various people get started, what are the challenges that may come up, how is self-directed, and continuing my own process of deschooling and learning what self-directed education can be and is. And so I would say that that was my step 0. And so yeah, just kind of summarizing that, like visiting places, reading, talking to people, and specifically making sure that they're, and this is my suggestion, my proposal is especially making sure you're talking to people of color, neurodiverse folks, LGBTQ folks, and if possible, compensating for their time and labor. I think it's hard because there's not a lot out there in the SDE world. But for me, Crystal Bird Farmer at Gastonia Freedom School, Akila Richard, Anthony, Galloway, were kind of like just people I reached out and connected to hear that perspective on like, what has it been as a Black person? What has it been as a person of color in this self-directed world? So just want to take a moment right now. I know we have like tons of folks in here and tons of amazing resources. So just for you all to collect resources too, and for me to collect resources, what are some of your best go-to resources? Books, people, and we could throw that into the chat with links if you can. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes doing that so folks can collect resources right now as well.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
So would you say that Liberated Kids looks more like a Sudbury model or more like Alder Commons?
It looks more like an Agile Learning Center model.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Cool. Bria's got a bunch of resources in there. And I know I'm sure all these resources will be collected by ASD and be put somewhere, but if anyone wants to speak to any of the resources they're putting out there, go for it. My Reflection Matters, yes. Any specific books or anything that anyone has come across, go for it. Sweet, Ken. If you have a link to that, you could just drop that in here as well. Oh, you put your website. There you go.
Thanks. I have my own book, but I also have a list of the books that influenced me the most, that are my favorite books. Also,
Awesome.
let me see if I can get the link for you.
Yeah, yeah. Trust Kids is the new one that's come out. Yeah, definitely untigering. Yeah.
And I am collecting these and I will put them in the resource database for the entire conference at the end of this.
So folks don't have to be, scrambling to write them all down.
Exactly.
Yeah. Folks can definitely continue putting those in the chat. Cool. So after that, I feel like what my next step was, I'm going to keep talking, but if people want to keep putting stuff in the chat, go ahead. Everyone learns differently. Keep doing you. I'm one of the people that, like, if I'm in a meeting or conference, like I need to constantly be like talking to the person next to me to like process. So whatever you need to do to process, go for it. But for me then, the next step was like, okay, like I've done all this reading. I have this base that I'm coming with, but like I haven't connected with people yet. And so before I did that, like I wanted to make sure like that the community, the tribe I found was like the right tribe, like, because there are a lot of people out there that have all kinds of views. And so I wanted to make sure that I was like, there's some sort of filter. And so my next step was getting my ideas down on paper, right? Like, what are my keys? What are my core values? What are my non-negotiables? And like, what's the vision? And so for me, right, it was like, there's definitely an emphasis on making sure this is like Black, Indigenous, people of color centered, that decolonization is at the core. And from my kind of like looking at things, like I felt I jived the most with the Agile Learning Center model. So using tools from the Agile Learning Center model. Also, there's this importance of like collective liberation. Like, yes, self-directed, yes, autonomous, but with at least an equal emphasis on community. And so I got that stuff on paper and I put it on a website, created a website, liberatedkids.org. I'll put in the link right now. This whole website was not created at that point. It was just like the homepage and the about page was created initially just to get ideas out there. I'll put that in the chat if I can. Yep, right there. So yeah, just to get the ideas out there, made a website, created a Liberty Kids Facebook profile, joined a bunch of like the homeschooling groups, the unschooling groups that are like local to the area. And then just started spreading the word. Also connecting with the people that I knew already that were like thinking a little bit, like questioning the school system a little bit, like connecting with them, holding like really brief. This was like height of the pandemic time at this point, so a lot of Zoom calls. But hosting, like even with friends that were just interested, like they saw the website, like, wait, I'm like interested in what you're thinking. And just having like brief info sessions. I'm like, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And not even info sessions. They weren't info sessions yet. They were brainstorming sessions, what we called them. Because the idea was like, here's a baseline. If you're down with this baseline, let's co-vision together. And so that was the initial like step there. It was like, how do I create something that's narrow enough to make sure it's like folks that I feel I want to be in part of this tribe, but broad enough where it's still like we are now going to co-vision this together and we don't have everything figured out. And so that was kind of the step there. And so this was kind of the vision that I had put out there for Liberated Kids at that point was Liberated Kids. And now some of the words have been changed. Some of the words have been changed now because we exist now versus we didn't exist before. But Liberated Kids is a self-directed education community for kids between the ages of 5 to 14. I don't think I put the ages initially because that was like up for discussion. Based in Oakland, we are an alternative to school where kids are recognized as leaders of their own learning. We are striving to be a safe space. Initially, I wrote that we are a safe space, but our community was like, like we're striving to be. We can't claim that we are. So that got put in later. We are striving to be a safe space where Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and other POC voices and experiences are centered. We are rooted in community as parents, family, and community members are guides and co-learners. We are endeavoring to decolonize childhood and allow our children to be their full self. That was kind of like the main vision that was put out there. And I feel just this vision was able to filter like who's going to be part of that initial team of co-visioners and making sure it's people that align. So yeah, so like if you are in this process of like starting something, like my proposals would be like, number one, like what is your idea or vision? And getting that down on paper. It doesn't have to be exact, doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not one of these people like, this is what a visioning statement has to be, and this is what a mission statement has to look like, but just getting it out on paper, like what are those ideas? What are your core values? What are your non-negotiables? And then intentionally, how will it be a safe space for people of color? And if you want to expand that, like how will it be a safe space for neurodiverse children? How will it be a safe space for queer LGBTQ community? So like, I think it's important to do that from the beginning. We were focused on like families of color, and we're only in year 2 right now. Year 1, we were focused on like families of color, and we ended up, our community was primarily Black families, or at least mixed race families, Black children. And this year, there's been a heavier focus on neurodiversity and gender diversity, and trying to make ourselves a safer space for kids, of those kids as well. But yeah, start where you're at. And so kind of that was our step 1. And that's my proposal. But I know, like I said, every center starts differently. I want to check in. I want to like do another breakout room, and this is a proposal. Well, not a proposal. This is kind of the direction I want to go in. I don't know. We'll see what our who folks are at, where folks are at. This was the idea though. The idea was to break out quickly into affinity groups right now. If you've never participated in an affinity group before, the idea of an affinity group is a designated safe space or safer space where everyone in that group shares one particular aspect of their identity. And this acknowledges that not all spaces are equally accessible to everyone, right? Our history, the history of trauma, generations of trauma and oppression play out in today's settings, even when we're just in a Zoom meeting like this as well. And so the goal right now is to have 2 breakout rooms that you will self-select into. Breakout room 1 will be people who identify as people of color. And this is up to you. So if you're a mixed race, if you know, whatever, it's up to you to identify how you identify. So breakout room 1 would be for people who identify as people of color. And they'll be talking about and taking notes on, maybe one person can take notes in that group. And like, what do you need from an SDE community or space? So one, that'll help you as you are creating your own space, if that's what you're planning to do, but it'll also support white allies and accomplices who are in spaces already or want to create spaces and want to make sure they're doing it in a way that's welcoming and open. Breakout room 2 will be white allies and accomplices. And kind of what you all will be discussing is how can you make SDE communities spaces safer for Black, Indigenous, and other peoples of color? And how can you continue your own process of unlearning and learning as well? And so that's what breakout room 2 we'll discuss. And ideally, if at the beginning of your little breakout session, y'all could just identify like a note taker. So when we come back and we share out, that person who takes notes can be the person who shares out as well. Breakout room 3 can be for folks who are like, you know what, I don't want to choose. I'm strongly encouraging you to choose breakout room 1 or 2. However, if that makes you feel uncomfortable, if this is the first time you're doing an affinity group and that makes you feel uncomfortable and just not something you want to do today, you could join breakout room 3 and still talk about the same question that breakout room 2 is talking about. How can you make SDE communities safer for Black, Indigenous, and other peoples of color? How can you continue your own process of unlearning? And kind of just another reminder of the agreement. Share your truth, equitable distribution of voice, our values, identities, past experiences matter, assume positive intent, and own your impact, ongoing learning process, and listen from a place of trying to understand. Are there questions, or do folks want to comment on the breakout room? So in this breakout room, you will self-choose. You'll have the option to choose which one you go into, 1, 2, or 3. Questions, comments, reservations? Okay. Recreate 3 rooms, let participants choose. Okay, the room should be open. Remembering room 1 is if you identify as a person of color. Room 2, if you're identifying as a white ally or accomplice. Room 3, if you don't want to choose.
Everybody. Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
I can take notes if nobody's opposed.
Thank you.
You.
I can sort of share a little bit of what I'm thinking about this question. I think for myself, it's been super important to self-educate on what other people's struggles have been, and who they are, not just struggles, but like who Black people are, who Latinx people are, you know, and the variations of that, and just really learning deeper and deeper who are Indigenous people, like what do they believe, things that are outside my cultural norms, has been a way that I feel like I become safer and safer to people of color, Black, Indigenous, queer, you know, people who I don't identify as. So I feel like just really dedicating time and energy to deepening my understanding of other people has been a practice that does yield. I feel like I am creating less harm the more I understand, the more I educate. So that's one way that I feel like is really important for me to contribute.
To build on to Catherine, I was going to say, as white people, I think it's really important for us to take a very long look into our own internalized racism and the way that we have been socialized to be racist. We look at race, we say the word racist like it's like a bad thing, but it's also like just a conditioning that we have all gone through in our lives. It's very hard to grow up in this country, in the United States specifically, and not hold some of those beliefs. So I think it's really becoming stronger in terms of looking at that and being vulnerable about it. I would also say being in spaces that do not center whiteness, where we are as white people in the racial minority, and really listening to what is happening and not inserting ourselves so much, but really kind of taking a back seat and listening. And there are so many people in this movement who I think we can learn from. So that's something that I would add as well.
I can add something to that, which is a few different things related, but something really helpful for me has been the work of Resmaa Menakem, which is a lot about like how white supremacy is like an embodied experience, and committing to practices that, I'm going to express it really poorly, but like make me more aware of my own body's like reflexive or mindless habits, like racing in front of people and talking over people and such, and really helpful with having like more aware and boundaried relationships with Black, Indigenous, and people of color in my community. And just like noticing things like, even in this group, like my heart rate speeding up, etc. And like when other people are talking, I'm like, maybe I'll just like hum to myself, nobody can hear me. And that kind of soothes down some of the jangly energy that comes up. I might get kicked off, which I hope I don't, but I might have a problem with my computer in a minute, in which case I will get back in. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I know building on that experience and talking about white supremacy, that's definitely a thing that is happening for a long time in the United States, and not, being grown up into a very small, like, white community, that's definitely eye-opening, some of the things that you see. So that's all I have to say for right now. Thank you.
I'll go. I had to wait until the noise quieted down in my house enough to unmute myself. Sorry. We our particular little community is pretty insulated as far as whiteness is concerned. And I find it really hard to integrate more diversity, even with offering scholarships. And I thought about bringing on some sort of BIPOC specific consultant to help me with just seeing things through a different lens, or moving my program to a community that had more diversity so that I could offer something, but then that feels like white saviory. Definitely open to ideas of potential integration. Also, similar to Tanya, like, I feel like when we have these conversations, I always feel like I'm going to say something wrong that offends somebody. And I feel like because we're so uneducated, it's highly likely that that we will, or I guess because I am so uneducated. So actually I kind of feel nervous about even sharing those kind of things in a setting like this, because I want to be respectful, but I don't necessarily have all the language.
One of the things that I've been finding has been really interesting working at the center that I'm instructor at.
Tanya, we can't hear you very well.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm outside. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
At our center, we have, even though we practice self-directed education, we decided that we would have one meeting a week. We call it ethics and kindness, and we bring up any topic that we think the whole community should be aware of, because I'm sharing in the newsletter every week information for parents, but it's and it's about race, about gender, about any topic that we think would make our community stronger. And yeah, so the meeting that we do once a week, we try to keep it very short, and to bring up a topic, even though it's not covering everything. At least it's there, and it's a seed for whenever we can feed more conversations. My learning right now, I have 2 learning points, is that it needs to be more community. There must be more community meetings with the families, so they have, because just asking them to read things, I mean, we need to be realistic. Everybody has so much things to do. Most people don't do it. And so if we want the families to not, or the facilitators to be doing the work of making this a safer space, I think for us, we are observing a high need for in-person meetings where we are talking about how we envision this topic, like what is how people feel about sexuality education, how people feel about hugging and kissing and sitting on people's lap, how do people feel about freedom versus community care. And my other one is to actually, something I think I heard at an ASD conference or an ALC, I don't remember, is how as white people, maybe if it's a thought, if we want to be real allies, we should maybe not start these centers ourselves, but just find the people and help people who want to do something, whatever that is, and help them with the resource we can have. So of course it doesn't feel our need maybe of opening a learning center, but that's something that I think it's interesting to keep in mind.
Yeah, I love that. Is it Marion? Am I saying your name right? Yeah, like, so I have a 4 school and we're in the process of potentially just hosting some sort of like 4 school teacher training specifically to BIPOC, like no to low cost, to just kind of like support people that want to have this kind of programming in their own community and giving them the tools. We're in the process of passing certain licensing to make 4 schools free in the state of Oregon. I know that's a little bit of a tangent, but what it does is just kind of open this pathway to people of color having opportunities to open centers, because they will be generating money from the federal government that's available to support people to having these kind of opportunities. So yeah, I think kind of like this this idea of, not showing up and opening centers in these areas, but supporting people in the community. I love that idea and concept.
I appreciate what folks are sharing. I'm sorry, I'm on a very old laptop, so I can't get my video to work, but I've been thinking about, as I've explored some of this learning centers in our area, they're pretty much all white led. And when I've asked questions about kind of like how they support the identity development of kids around race and gender and all aspects of identity, a lot of what they've said has been like, we wait till kids bring stuff to us. Like if it's self-directed, it means like we don't raise the issue unless the kids bring it to us. And what you were sharing, Marianne, really resonated. Like there are some, I know, like just as an anti-biased, anti-racist educator for a bunch of years, like if we don't bring issues to our kids, like they're just going to take in the messages they're getting in the world. And those are white supremacist messages. And those are capitalist and patriarchal and ableist messages. And I think about my 5-year-old, and it's tricky for me sometimes because I'm a white woman and, have been really invested in white anti-racist organizing for a long time, but I'm raising a multiracial Black child and my partner is Black. And we have a lot of what we want for her in a learning community. We don't want her to be the only kid of color. But my role as a white person is not necessarily to start a center, but my role as a parent of a Black child is to make sure she's in community with kids and families who also look like her. And so I'm in a tricky place where I'm trying to figure out, like, how do I navigate my role as a white anti-racist woman in the world, and also as a parent. And like ideally we're in a town that is racially and economically diverse, but I haven't yet found folks of color who are looking to create self-directed education community and spaces. We've got like lots of great friends, but people are going traditional school routes. So I've been in a funny place of trying to figure out like what my role is in our broader community and what my role is in our family. And it's, there's a lot to kind of work through. I appreciate that so much. I'm in a similar spot as a white woman raising Black children. And I feel like we have to also see that we are not seen as white people as a safe space. Just we can't be trusted right away. You have to earn that by doing the work. And I don't know, Marian, if I was at the same conference as you, but a Black facilitator said this exact thing, and it stayed with me, and I wrote it down, and it said, I personally think if you have no Black adults, you are not a safe place for Black children as such, or try to recruit Black kids. Instead, do your work and get Black adults involved first. We need more Black created and led spaces, not more Black kids in white spaces. And that just, it just struck me, because I was like, me too. I am a person who wants to create. I want to do these things, but it is not my role right now in the kind of space I want myself, my children, for the world. for me to be the leader of that space. And so I feel like in some ways, it's about growing our communities first and figuring out who's missing, who's not here, and kind of going from there. It was actually from the head of Abundant Beginnings, which is also out in the Bay Area. I believe her name is Shayna Cureton. And it just stuck with me, and I kind of carry it in my back pocket.
Do you have it handy where you could paste it in the chat at some point?
I absolutely will.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Maria, will we be able to see it still if we leave this chat?
No, you might want to paste it in the main room chat if you're willing.
I'll wait. Yes.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Heidi.
Thank you, Katie, for sharing that. Really appreciate it. Kate, sorry, Kate.
Kate, if you're willing to talk offline, I'd love to chat with you more about just like what we do with our kids in the meantime while we're creating and building.
All right. Everyone back? Cool. So I do want to state that we only had 2 people in the PLC group, in the People of Color group. So I want to just continue to be in conversation with ASDE on how do we get the conference to be more diverse. So let's just continue that conversation as well. But want to do a share out. Myself and May were sharing in the PLC group, and so wanted to share out what we shared about what we need from NSD community and space, and then group 2 can share out like what they heard from us, and then also their list of how they can help make SDE spaces safer. So I'm gonna close this so we can see each other a little bit. May, should I share since I was note taking?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay. So some of the things we shared, at least from our perspective, is, and one perspective of being Chinese, South Asian, what a safe space for us, a safe SDE space for us, is being away from like the cultural expectations of schoolishness. So that's one thing that makes a space safe for us. Another thing that makes a safe space is thinking about the other kids and families our children will be around, and like what politics, philosophies, theories that they come with. And so being mindful of that is something else we talked about. And then related to that, we talked about having adult facilitators in the space who are well versed in keeping a safe space and in managing when harm has been caused. First, like recognizing when harm is being caused, and second, like being well versed, being able to resolve, facilitate those, mediate those conversations when harm is being caused. So having a adult facilitator who's well versed in that. Also, representation matters. So having adult facilitators and kids in the space already that are folks of color, or we were also talking about gender diversity, but like obviously if there's a Black facilitator, a Black family is going to feel more comfortable coming in, things of that sort. We talked about safe space, also the resources of the environment that's created, especially in SDE, right? We talked about how like the environment's the medium. So what's on the walls, what kind of books are around, what kind of videos are being watched, what kind of toys are there, what kind of dolls are there, what are the races of dolls. So just being aware and mindful of everything that's in the space. And then something that I've heard from our community a lot, from the Liberated Kids community, is just like wanting that ability to be ourselves completely without being corrected in any way, without feeling like we're different, without feeling like we have to be different to adjust to someone else. Our community has talked about like we do that in enough spaces already that we don't want our child to have to do that in their essence. And then may also learn just like a community where there's like ongoing learning opportunities, like My Reflection Matters, book clubs, where people are talking about this. It's not something that is ignored. It is not something that's like, you know, it's addressed, it's talked about. So those are some of the things we talked about. Anything to add, May, to that?
No, you did a great job summarizing. Thanks.
Group 2, I don't know if you guys have a spokesperson or not, or you guys can decide, but maybe you can share what you heard from us first, what you heard from what we said, and then you all can share what you guys talked about.
Hey, I heard from you, May and Raj, that representation is important. So adults and children who are Black, South Asian, Asian, Indigenous, and yeah, that would that sounds like that would create a safer space.
I heard that you want these conversations to be had about anti-racism and these issues, and you want them out in the open with book clubs and sessions, and for it not to be ignored or quieted, but for it to be spoken about and addressed.
I heard that Black, Indigenous, and other people of color want spaces where they can be their full selves, because you have to be masking and be certain ways in other spaces, and you want spaces where you can be your full, absolute selves.
I heard that you would like to have adults who are versed in harm management, so it feels like, you know, there's some, it makes it a safer space.
I heard you say that you'd like to be free of schoolish expectations or the traditional conventional expectations regarding schooling, as well as having some awareness that you have a shared worldview, whether it's religious or political, I'm not, you know, with the other families that are there.
Yeah, I guess to clarify, it was more like making sure that there aren't harmful religious or political views in the space.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Would love to hear from group 2, just about what you guys talked about as well. You guys could share.
I will read the notes, but then we'll give a few seconds because I might have skipped something and I don't want to outlook anybody. We said that to be allies in those SDE space, we need to self-educate about other people's present and past struggles, understand more who are the people that we are not from our cultures, so that we can be safer towards these people and not create harm. So there are several points about like taking a look at our own internalized racism and our conditioning. Accept to be in space that do not center whiteness and do a great deal of listening. One more piggyback on that also, somebody said the white supremacy, it was from an author, I think, but I didn't write the name properly. White supremacy is an embodied experience and we need to be more aware of it. And once we're aware of it, we can maybe start changing that. Some people talked about like how they can hire a consultant or decide on their on where they are locating their center. so that it can be more reachable to people of color or people of other groups. We talk about having community meetings with families in person to discuss community values and see what are the agreements or the base agreements that we have around those. Because just sharing resource for families to educate themselves on their own is not enough. Also having community meetings with the children, even though we are in SDE spaces, if we decide that community matters, we might have to have conversations where we strongly encourage everybody to attend and that we can talk about anti-oppression topics. We also talk about how we can support communities by providing resources or trainings to the communities who actually want to have that kind of programming in their communities. So instead of us doing it, how we can share our resources. The last point, which I think is merges what you all are saying too, is we need more Black-led space and more Black adults in the space, not more Black kids in white spaces, which is by Sheena from Abundant Beginnings, and it's something she said in a previous conference. Yeah, that's all I have on the notes.
Thank you for sharing. Does anyone want to add? Anyone in that group that wants to add to that? I want to also acknowledge this, using this as also like something that you could bring back to your own community. Like I think it even works even if like we had just 2 POC members and you know it still works. I feel there's still a comfortability that May and I could speak to each other that maybe we might not have in a bigger space, and then being able to share it out is fine. Like it still works. So just again, another proposal to try to bring this back to your own spaces as well. We don't have too much time left, about 8 minutes or so. I would love to continue these conversations, and I'm sure there may be some networking spaces in the rest of the conference. I'll be here every day, pretty much all conferences, mornings and stuff like that. I'm super excited to like be here and like talk with people and all that stuff and learn from everyone. So I'll be here. So definitely like we could figure out other times too. Let me see, sorry. Go back to slideshow. Gonna skip some of this stuff. So some of the steps that ELK Liberated Kids is taking, I feel like, to be a decolonized space. And one of the things is like, there's no one definition for decolonization. We all have our own. And again, talking about that is super important. But I feel like some of the things that we do, and some of the stuff is just SDE, right? Like leaving the institution of schooling, mixed ages, learning from the tools of the culture, are all like indigenous practices as well. What makes us a little different than other SDE spaces is that all of our facilitators are actually parents and caregivers of kids. So we have 2 to 3 people, 2.5, I guess, people who are employed, who are paid, who are also parents. And we have parent volunteers who might come like once a week or every other week, things of that sort. The goal is not to create another institution where families are just dropping off their kids and having this different compartment, but really having a life that flows together and is connected, like life in communities previous to colonization. So really we're trying to create a village in the community, not just the center. Trying to steer away from capitalism. We are sliding scale from 0 to 1,100, 1,200 is what a couple of families are paying. Most of our families contribute somewhere between 0 to 300, but we're not looking at anyone's finances. There's no set amount. It's pay what makes sense for you and your family. Not even pay, contribute what makes sense for you and your family on a month-to-month basis. And really trying to be relationship based as much as possible.
Could I ask a question?
Go ahead.
First of all, do you mind sharing your sliding scale with us? What that looks
Yeah.
like? Do you have it?
We have a document. I'll share it. Let me share this real quick because I'm already on this. And then I'll find the financial document. Or maybe I'll find it afterwards and have it in the resources.
No problem.
But yeah, so thank you for that question. That was good.
I also have an additional question to go off of that. Talking about your sliding scale and, integration of people from the school, helping to be a part of the school as a living, breathing system is really rad. How do you subsist? Like, do you also have other funding streams?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest question for everyone. Right now, we subsist on VELA grants and what we've gotten from our families. We are able to sustain, like, from what we get from our families, we're able to sustain like our employee, like paying our 2 facilitators and like all our costs other than rent. And so we're still trying to figure out location. We're just in year 2. We're still trying to figure out how can we be financially sustainable without like outside grants, because those aren't the most dependable every single year. And so those are the things we're still trying to figure out as well. But luckily, we've gotten the VELA grants the last couple of years that have helped us stay afloat.
Sorry, could you say that? What's the grant again?
VELA, they fund all the micro grants, homeschooling, unschooling folks. They are also funded by right-leaning Walton Foundation, Koch brothers. So there's contradictions there as well, which we talked about as a community, and we came to the decision to like accept the money anyways, as long as they're not like attached, having any strings attached to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you there. I find that like when you get grant money and then invite families into the program, you have to make sure that that money is so consistent, because then like families want to come back year after year. So that funding stream has to be solid. And I feel like that's where I always fall short, because you never know if you're going to get it from year to year.
Yeah. Some of the other things no problem. Some of the other things I feel like we're doing to be a decolonized space is collective decision making. I'll send these docs to Bria. Oh, you guys will have the slideshow, so you'll have access. So we have processes for collective decision making. Like as much as we do modified consensus. So it's like we all got to agree, or at least the point where you're not blocking a decision. And so we've had really important conversations in the last 2 years over that. We had a conversation on families like pretty strongly saying we do want to be a BIPOC only space for now, even though that wasn't the initial vision. We had intense conversations on COVID and masking. And right now we're deep in conversations on approach to like gender, puberty, and sex in the LK space, in our space with kids. And so as adults, we're also really talking about that as well. So yeah, I'm going to skip ahead because we are out of time. The builds, I think once you have that vision and you have that team, and again, someone's talked about this already. ALC has a starter kit. Agile Learning Centers has a starter kit, which is really in depth as well to take a look at if you want to start something. Let's skip ahead to the ending. Cool. So heck, I appreciate all of you for being here and being part of this conversation. I feel like this is just starting it. Like I would love to just keep going deeper into this and having some more time to brainstorm. I was hoping for a little more time to brainstorm for folks, but maybe we could do that in a networking session. And so one way to support families of color on their SDE journey is to support those communities financially. If you're not part of that community already, I am in the process of creating like an SDE spaces that are BIPOC centered, like a whole list of them, so folks can like know where they exist and also can support them financially if they want. I don't have that list yet, But if you want to support liberated kids, I will put that in the chat. As this is definitely one thing we are still figuring out. And then would love if you fill out a survey, just 2 questions on like what worked for you in this and what didn't. Because I think feedback as facilitators of this type of space or even in SDE spaces is super important. Getting feedback from the kids, getting feedback from families, getting feedback from whoever is in the space. So if you have a moment, definitely just answer those 2 questions in the feedback survey. I don't know what the plan is, Bria, next. Like, we have to leave. If some people want to stay on for Q&A, can we stay on? I also want to just give people a break, so I'm open. I know you put something in the chat, Bria, of like maybe another opportunity when we can continue conversation.
Yeah, I'll repaste it. You can stay on. I can keep this open. Oops, I didn't send it to everyone. Yeah, I can keep this open for a little while. I do want to encourage people to take a break. Also, but we have 30 minutes, so you have a long time. And the next panel is just in the main room. There's 1 session, 1 panel for everyone, and it will be recorded. But I'll keep this room open if you want to keep going.
Cool. I think, yeah, I'm down to stay for another 10 minutes if folks want to question, answer, brainstorm, things of that sort. But yeah, super appreciative to everyone here. And just would love, yeah, these things are so hard. I just want to like know about everyone's process and stories much more in depth.
Thank you for your time and for sharing things that can be vulnerable. And I just really appreciate you being willing to share your journey. And it's really inspiring.
Yeah, I want to say, go ahead, May.
No, I just had a question, but so if you had something, Tanya, go ahead.
I can totally wait.
Raj, I was looking through your slides and I was curious on the collective liberation slide. You mentioned there's 3 bubbles: decolonization, learning from Indigenous knowledge, and new paths forward. I was hoping you could speak a little bit about how your group has either like connected or, I don't know, learn with the like Indigenous population in your area, or if they're, how is that part of your program?
I mean, one of our facilitators is Black, but has like a lot of roots in Africa and like Indigenous African knowledge, and so she brings that to the table in her offerings. And I think we have connected a little bit with the local Indigenous community here, but want to continue to do that more. And so I think part of it's just valuing the ways of being and knowledge, right, of that are not traditionally accepted and valued in Western societies. But I think that one's just still a work in progress for us as well at this point. But I think part of it's like community. Like if we're hoping, don't have like anyone that's Indigenous to like our space right now, part of our community. Although there was someone that was like interested, a family that's interested. So we'll see next year. But yeah, I think part of it are like reaching out to folks and doing that. We've had like one time when folks. So I live on unceded Ohlone territory, now called Oakland, California. So we did have an offering at the beginning of the year where an Ohlone member, an Ohlone elder, did lead like just the land blessing with our community. But yeah, they're not intricately woven into our community.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. So how do you feel about one day like legislation for all schools to be democratic and not, all kids have the choice to learn what they want to learn. That's kind of my big take on things. I think all kids should be able to learn from their own interests.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was like, because I was in the school system for a lot of years. It's like my mind first went there too, but then like when we actually started our community, the community was very clear that the community was like, we want to focus on our community, and strengthen our community and not these bigger issues.
Uh-huh.
Not because we don't care about everyone, but because like that is what kind of like what is like decentralized, right? Is like creating small things everywhere. And that will slowly influence, like the theory is that will slowly influence larger systems.
Yeah.
But a larger system is a larger system. Mom, and like their system is a way, not by accident that kids are learning what they are taught. It's not an accident the kids have this curriculum and they're supposed to learn X, Y, and Z every year. So to change that, like something that's backed by a government, right? Like to change that from the whole system, when the system is doing what it's intending to do, right? Is our theory. Like that's where we're like, I don't know if that's actually gonna work. So I think our stance is standing up against things that are not working, that are oppressive, and at the same time creating the world we want to create. It's kind of like where we're at. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But I like there's a model. There's someone in Canada that's doing like, what is it called? I forgot what it's called, but like, there's IEPs. It's called Individual Educational Plans for Kids here, to create something where it's like an IEP for like a free learner. Like the parents could submit something and be like, my kids are free learners. They can opt in and out of any activities they want to, as long as they're not being disruptive or something like that. There's someone, I forgot, Unschooling School is the organization in Canada, I think. Unschooling School.
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, I didn't know about that.
Like attacking this question, and their approach is like, we will then infiltrate the system, because if there's like one kid doing that, obviously all the other kids want to do that. Like, is their approach. Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you again, Raj. And this was a really, really helpful kind of workshop webinar. It really had practical, applicable suggestions, and also was like a really good, for me, overall reminder, like, let's just slow down. Like, let's just slow down, right? Like, I think that's something that contributes to unsafe spaces being created, is just like the speed. Like I have that impulse, like I want to do a flying squads in April, and I want to open a 1 day a week offering in September, but it's like, slow down, because you're going to get off of like right relationship and integrity. So I really, really appreciate the content and the structure of everything in this workshop.
Thanks again. Bye.
Yeah. Maybe a couple more minutes and then I'll break it off too. So break. Tanya, where are you located again?
I'm in Ontario, Canada. So I'm in Hamilton, which is about an hour from Toronto. So it's an interesting place, kind of like an amazing place, like bursting with creativity and like a lot of collective care, and but a place where life's really hard. There's a lot of policy decisions that make life really hard for a lot of people and structures, obviously. Yeah.
Raj, do you happen to know any folks in New Jersey who have this orientation?
Not that I know. I don't think I'm connected with anyone in Jersey, but I'm telling you, just like create like a vision and throw it out there.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised by how many people will be like, I'm on board, especially if you're in a place that's like, that's more metropolitan, like Jersey. I feel like you'll be surprised by how many people will jump on if you just post like the homeschooling and unschooling groups in that area.
Yeah.
You'll be shocked at how many people are like, I want to do that too. Like they're just waiting for someone to put it out there, you know?
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. This was really inspiring.
Thanks again, everybody. See
All
you
right.
later.
Have fun, everyone, during the rest of the conference this weekend.